Okay. Always want to make sure.
All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the April 19th, 2023 Technical Review Committee meeting. My name is Ryan Fisher. I'm a senior planner with Oldham County Planning and Development. So the purpose of this Technical Review Committee meeting is to review proposed subdivisions, zoning map amendments, and development plans before they go to the Planning Commission. This gives local agencies and utility companies, those up here in front of us today, the chance to review plans in advance, as well as adjoining property owners the opportunity to ask technical questions of the applicant or agencies. So we have one item on the docket today. It's 23-004 for a proposed Dollar General on North Highway 53 in LaGrange. So the way the meeting will run, we will allow the applicant to come forward first and give a brief overview of their application. The agencies that are represented up here in front of you will then give their comments to the applicant, and then we will lastly let public comment if they need to. Anyone in the audience would like to come forward, ask any questions that are technical in nature of either the agencies represented in front of you or the applicant, then they can do so at that time. So with that being said, we will have the applicant come forward and give us an overview of the application.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Mike Swansburg, and I'm an attorney with the law firm of Swansburg and Smith here, actually in LaGrange. My office is just on the other side on West Main Street. For those of you who I have not had the chance to meet with as well, I'm also assistant Commonwealth's attorney here in Oldham County. I say that not because my clients have any criminal matter before you today, but simply just to relay to you all that I am here all the time. And I'm really excited, by the way, to have this opportunity to sit down and chat with you all about this project that we are going to talk about today. I represent an entity called the Kentucky Lodging and Development Company, and that is a group that is here applying for a zoning change. I'm sorry.
Can you
hear me?
It may be the air conditioning. The green button is on the base of that, right? Just check sure
Green, yep. So if I speak closer to it, can you hear me? No?
Just
okay.
Because it's the air conditioning. If you want to hear, just move down. Plenty of seats up front, as they say in church.
As you all may be aware, we're actually here to seek a change, an amendment to the zoning map. Current zoning location, which is currently zoned as CO1. We're looking to make it C1, a commercial 1 district, for the purpose of building a Dollar General store, which is, again, stated in our application as well. I've got with me a couple of folks, Andy Otney, who's with Kentucky Lodging and Development Company as well, the applicant himself. We've got Will Stevens, who's the engineer on this project, and I suspect is going to actually be the one to answer most or address most of the technical issues that we have today. I'm a lawyer. I don't really have a lot of expertise in the technical areas, so I will let Will speak to that front. And of course, we also have Jay Hall, who is the owner of the property, here with us today as well. Again, really appreciate the opportunity for us to come in and chat with you all about this. We see this, quite frankly, as an informal discussion to give you our input, and also, quite frankly, to seek your input and to make sure that at the end of the day, the application that we put forward meets the standards and expectations of the Planning and Development Commission here, and quite frankly, the citizens of Oldham County. So with that, I will step aside and let, if Andy has any comments that he would like to make. If not, Will can also stand up and we can kind of really get into that discussion about the technical aspects of this particular request. If anyone has any other additional questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them, but otherwise I will turn it over to the technical experts.
All right, thank you. Do you want to say anything? No? Okay. All right. So I will start.
Do we have, for the sake of the audience, we have a so they can see it?
We actually don't have
give them one of
electronic,
those
but we have
ones.
paper versions if folks want to do it. We'd be happy to handle those out as well. So.
Don't need a copy of the site plan. Just making sure.
Are you good? Are you good?
All right. So with that being said, I'll begin from planning and development. Provided these written comments to you all before the meeting. Not very much there, but first one include parcel IDs on those adjoining property owners for us, including the acreage in the street right of way, if any, and include maximum lot coverage for the proposed structures. And then there was a lot of landscaping stuff already on the plans, but just know that a separate detailed landscape and lighting plan will be required at that time of construction plan review and approval. And just a few things that I did see preliminary on those plans were just ensure that landscape buffer area requirements are met along the adjoining property owners to the south and the right of way. There were some there, but it looked like on the south side we needed that landscape buffer if you want to step up to the. Mm-hmm.
So I was still trying to, get a handle on all the comments and things from the letter, but I noticed that, and I just wanted to make sure that we didn't miss an opportunity to fix anything that might be lacking on that. We had proposed a 4-foot tall opaque fence to screen the headlights that would be facing the highway. So that was our highway screening. We thought that matched your all's regulations. On the south side, there's considerable vegetation. Not necessarily on our property, but adjacent to it in the streamline. It's basically the riparian buffer around the stream, and we felt like that is going to remain in place because that stream's not going to be disturbed, and that would meet the screening requirement. Also, there's considerable elevation change from our side to the other side of the stream. The other side is somewhere between 20 and 30 feet higher than our site, so we felt like the combination of the existing vegetation and the elevation change would meet the buffer requirement, but I wanted to be certain that we were meeting your expectations.
And that's fine. That'll be looked at more in depth when we get the landscape plans on, what percentage of existing vegetation there that we can use to quantify with that landscape buffer requirement. So that's something I just wanted to make note of that to be sure that you all were thinking about that. The fence did look good there on the right of way side, but yeah, just so you know, there will be a separate landscape lighting plan that's required. In addition to that, I noted the second point on there about the ILA requirements. So those in our regulations require one island every 10 spaces. So it's really kind of that area directly in front of the Dollar General. There needs to be some sort of island in there every 10 spaces. It looks like there were 15 on that front side. So wherever you need to put that island in to be able to maintain that requirement. And then the last one, just ensure screening requirements. So those in our regulations in section 300-090 talk about service structures. So those including the propane tanks, the dumpsters, those will all be shown on the landscape and lighting plan as well. So just note that. And then just the last one, something we talked about this morning, but the access easement there, if that ever happens to be another structure over there on the left side where you may have to have that shared maintenance access agreement in place. So that is all I had.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Go down to Jim Solomon now.
Okay. So first, we observed that this appears to be greater than an acre of land disturbance, so you'll be required to obtain a KYR-10 permit from the Division of Water, as well as the Stormwater Quality Management and Erosion Control permit from my office. Looking at the USGS map viewer online, you noted the creek that runs along the south property. I think you said you're not going to disturb that creek, so if you're outside of the ordinary high water mark, typically, it sounds like you're aware the Army Corps and the Division of Water aren't going to require permitting, but if grading or other work gets down in that ordinary high water mark, you'll be aware that you need to get permitting or coordination from those agencies. Of course, you're encroaching on the state right-of-way. I think we discussed this on the telephone the other day, that you're already coordinating with the KYTC District 5 with regard to what they're going to require. With regard to the trips generated from the site, some research I did online indicate that the Dollar General would be the variety store on the ITE trip generation manual. So it puts you in our regulations where you would require the traffic assessment, not a traffic impact study. It sounds like you're also coordinating with the state on what they would require, either above or beyond that. So if you just coordinate with us prior to Planning Commission, again, we'll require the traffic assessment. If they need more, we'll be in coordination with them. I know Daniel Wyatt with District 5 is not here today. Let's see. Ryan mentioned the access easement. Just if there's a maintenance agreement required in the future, you'll coordinate that with the Planning and Development Office.
To that point, they will prepare a maintenance agreement just for their own sake, and they'll have to get that approved by Dollar General. Do you all need to review that to make sure it complies with any kind of internal?
I'll let Ryan or Jim address that as far as an access easement.
We would submit that to you all before we go to DG with. Okay. Thank you.
Include your pavement section for the parking and driveway on the next set of plans you provide. So you show the proposed detention. It doesn't have anything indicating how you're going to address the water quality treatment that's in our ordinance. Some commercial sites propose the proprietary structures. We actually prefer a weir, if you can do some type of weir structure on the outlet structure, because not only is that it's easier to maintain and construct, but it also provides a kind of a secondary flow restriction below the 2-year storm event.
And so that was one of the main questions I had is I realized you had the requirements, but I realized that it's one thing to have lots of options in the regs and what you actually prefer. So I wanted to make sure that you've already mostly answered my question, but to that point, are you envisioning with the weir structure, do you want like a sand filter to allow?
Some of them we've seen, it's just a short, maybe 6 to 12 inch concrete wall on the inlet structure coming into the outlet structure with, it could be a 2-inch gap in it that just slows that flow and allows some settling of water.
Okay with basically depending on just completely on natural infiltration to completely drain the pond, as opposed to speeding that up with something like a sand filter at the lowest elevation.
Right. Yep. The basin, it needs to be encompassed by a drainage easement, and you'll need to record that with the county clerk. We'll require that before we release the erosion control bond, so you don't have to have it up front, but by the end it needs to be there. No trees in the 100-year water surface elevation of the basin. You indicate the flood plain or flood elevation 100-year storm on the Brush Creek tributary. It's interesting because a review of the FEMA maps that I was looking at, it shows a limit of the study bisects the property. So if you could just confirm where you got that elevation to translate it over to the stream.
I can talk about that briefly, our process. We're pretty far along in the flood analysis. So it's kind of an odd situation. Like you said, we're at the end of the study. Kentucky Division of Water has a website that they post their flood studies on for Zone A floodplains, and that's where we got our elevation from that we depict on the map, because it was the most upstream elevation available from their headgrass model. We've since internally taken their model and evaluated it with the focus on our impact of our design, whereas their model's more holistic for the entire stream. It's a better model for our specific area. We've proven that our proposed fill will not impact any adjacent structures, has no impact on, there is water that will flow over the road now and in the future in a 100-year storm, but we don't add to that weir flow over the highway in front of us. And so because of the oddity of being at the end of the floodplain at the end of the study, we have already submitted a loan application to FEMA to remove the portion of our property that is above the floodplain elevation given by the Division of Water for that site, so that we'll be in Zone X by the time we start construction, so that we're not going to be in need of a floodplain fill permit from the state or what have you. And I'll be happy to provide like our model and our calcs for you to review after the.
So I think, I don't think you have to have that by planning commission, but as long as you have it for construction plan review that you submit with our permit, that'd be great.
Yeah, we just took special care because of the kind of uniqueness of the situation. It wasn't like we could just fully rely on the map, with it being at the end of the map. So
Only other comments I had were just, you didn't show any like outlet treatment, whether it's riprap or velocity dissipators on your structures. So when it comes time for construction review, we'll want to see that. And then also, we like to see the final outlet structure of the basin 15 feet from the nearest property line for maintenance purposes.
that's gonna be difficult. I think I can make that where I looked at that because you'd mentioned that, or maybe you did when I spoke to you the other day. I think our only option, we might be able to change that pipe, lengthen the pipe, and move it toward the east, like the east end of our pond. That might be the best path because that's what we struggled with was getting an outlet elevation low enough that we could drain everything, and that's why the pipe is where it is. But I think we could maybe reshape the area.
That might help too, because then if you could adjust it also so the pipe, so the direction of the flow comes to the stream in the same direction of the stream, because right now it's going upstream. So if you could rotate it, that'd help too.
But I'm talking about yeah, I'll be able to rotate the flow after it leaves the pipe. But yeah, what I'm proposing would be even more opposed to the flow of the stream because that's the only place, elevation works because we're in a precarious position because we don't own any of the stream. We're adjacent to it. And also, even if we did own part to the stream, I don't want to get into what you mentioned earlier. I want to avoid impacting the stream itself. So if you get too low, you're impacting the bank of the stream and potentially causing an erosion problem.
What you can do with those considerations, please. Okay. That's all.
We spoke about the address for this building with that Lomar. We had to adjust some addresses further up the street, so it won't be a problem issuing you a number. So if it goes, whenever we need it for like permits and stuff, there is.
Whenever you can provide it, it'll be good. Matter of fact, FEMA was questioning the address we gave them on our application the other day. So if you have something provisional, that'd be great.
Yeah, yeah, we have it though.
Thank you.
Mr. Ward?
We've done our preliminary subdivision site evaluation for the commercial properties, so we know we have 100% of our primary septic system. We have our repair area for that. We know the creek is nearby, but we have greater than 50-foot setback distance from that and 25-foot setback distance from the drainage. There was a concern we had a little groundwater issue that day, but we're keeping our separation distance required to stay off of that. Just to be finished with on-site, to go over the facility itself, at some point you'll have to submit building plans to us here at the health department. There's a $50 plan review fee that comes along with you all have done this before, the 5 set of plans. We'll review it, we'll send it off to Division of Plumbing for you all. Then at some point, right before the building opens, there will be a facility permit because you all will have food, so there'll be limited food service. Then you'll have biannual inspections from the health department biannually on that as well. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Keith Smith, LaGrange Fire and Rescue Department. Got 3 comments on it. Start the smallest one. We will require a Knox box on that property before opening. Secondly, in just looking at the diagram there, you've got an above ground LP tank, correct? Okay. Need to see what size that's going to be. I would refer you to NFPA 58 because it also looks like you have a dumpster garage or a dumpster pad, a couple of dumpsters maybe drawn in right there near those bollards. You're going to need to be, depending on the size of that tank and everything, at least 10 to up to 25 feet away from that tank and all with those dumpsters and any other portion of the building. So NFPA 58 is where you need to look on that for measurements and everything. I don't know them exactly off the top of my head. Depends on, again, the size of the tank. And then lastly, we will be requiring a hydrant to be installed near the driveway of that property, preferably. I think there's I saw on diagram an 8-inch line or something coming up through there. So we would prefer to have a two 4.5-inch double steamer NST thread hydrant on the left side as you're entering, right there, by the driveway. That's all I had.
Okay, I'll verify with the water department about their flow and pressure there because I know. There you go. Yeah. So we'll take care of that. On the Knox box, do you just want that adjacent to the front door on the building, or?
It doesn't really matter to us. A lot of times, if you've got an employee entrance and all that, and nearby wherever you have your alarm panel, so if there's one near the back, you can stick it near the back as long as we can walk up to it easily. I thought, isn't there a man door on I call it the Bravo side? Yeah. So, you can put it there and stuff right out front. And the easiest way is going to my website for the fire department at www.lfrd.org, and there's a link on there for Knox box, and you can order it electronically. You just need the minimum box, which is a 3200 series, and order that up, and they'll alert me when you order one. And if you have any problems, you can just give me a holler.
And the hydrant itself, that's a hard requirement by the city, right? There's no, because they don't normally do hydrants. But we're normally in rural areas, so I understand.
Right. Yeah, it has to be a hydrant within 400 feet.
Okay.
Of that, and there's nothing there now. So
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Scott with LaGrange Utilities. So we discussed water there a second ago, so yeah, you'll need to get with us. We'll get you those flow numbers. Do y'all plan to fill over top the existing water main? Is there any fill going over that?
No, we designed around the water main. There's in fact going to be a retaining wall because we're avoiding the water main. Because when we talked to you all earlier,
Said we
realized
really didn't want it right.
Yeah, it's a very important main. I think that you all purchase your water or sell your water one way or the other through that line.
And then the only other comment was on the septic system. Of course, that's in the city limits, which requires sewers, but we don't have sewers available there at this time. So I just wanted the owner to understand that when sewers are available, you will be required to hook to the sewer, even if you have septic at that time. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
On our final plans, I'm going to show a sewer line stubbing out from that first clean out coming out of the building that heads towards the road, because I would assume that sewer would be served from the highway frontage. I would assume.
Yeah, that would be most likely, most probable.
We wouldn't have to tear up the parking lot in the future to get on sewer.
That's all I have.
All right. Thank you. So with that being said, we'll open it up for public comment. If anybody would like to come forward from the audience, and ask questions that are technical in nature of either the applicant or the agencies represented here today, we just ask you please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record and speak loudly.
How y'all doing? Thing works. That's good. My name is Matthew Young. I live at 2217 North Highway 53. I am the adjoining property to the south of this.
Matthew, I think if you pull the microphone up, you may not have to crouch down so far. Let's see that.
All right, I'm kind of used to crouching for everything being so tall sometimes. Thank you. Majority of my concern is with the creek and with any potential flooding or contamination. You had just mentioned something about, I believe, a setback distance. I'm not quite sure what that is. Could you explain that to me?
The lateral field, the creek, 50 feet away from you. That's a setback.
The lateral field.
Where their wastewater that's being generated at the facility, it's not going to municipal sewers because it's not available. It'll be used in on-site septic system.
Okay.
So the wastewater will be all contained on the property and put back into the ground in that area.
Into a leach type field?
Into a lab bucket.
And does that ever expand? Is it possible that that expands to the creek, or are those setback distances?
No, that's a hard set.
Okay. With the intake and what are they listed as? Intake and outtake, inlets and outlets. I'm not quite sure how that would not flood the creek, seeing as, well, I know from being down there with the kids that the creek is several feet lower than the stormwater detention pond. And with the hydrostatic principle that connects two bodies of water with any pipe, they're going to self-level. So I didn't know if anybody could explain how that's not going to affect or flood the creek.
So they're required, in accordance with our stormwater, post-construction stormwater ordinance, to design the basin and the storm sewer system. So they calculate the post-construction runoff at the 2, 10, and 100-year storm events. And the basin will be designed to accommodate those events, and they will look at the elevations of adjoining land. But I mean, really, if you're looking at what you're concerned about, it sounds like, is the stream backing up into their basin?
Is the stream going to raise up onto my property down there?
So again, what their discharge is designed to be limited so it doesn't exceed what it currently discharges at those events. So the intent of those calculations is that it doesn't discharge any more than it currently does. And so again, in like the applicant stated, that I agree with them. If you look at the elevations, the ground around your home is about 19 feet higher than what appears to be that flooding stage in the creek. So I mean, that's even a pretty significant buffer.
I think it's probably closer to 30 feet. But I'm not really concerned about my backyard, per se, as the part of my yard that we use at the creek.
So again, with that concern, the additional stormwater runoff that their site generates is to be captured in that basin and held and released at a slower volume so it doesn't affect the creek the way you're concerned it would.
So that's why they build what looks to be a 3-foot berm around it to hold it, and then there's some type of measure installed to restrict or slow the flow out.
Basically, for lack of a better term, there's a smaller pipe so it doesn't leave the site faster than it should.
It would come out with more pressure.
It can, and that's why I mentioned to him that we would like to see velocity dissipators or some other measure that at certain events, when it's over, say, 10 feet per second or a certain velocity, it is slowed down so it reduces erosion or the potential for erosion.
When you speak of a 100-year storm, what exactly does that mean? Because every time it rains, I can see clearly down there that the whole area is flooded anyway.
It's kind of a misconception, and there's a move to stop calling it a 2, 10, and 100-year storm. A 100-year storm is the probability that 1%, or the 1% probability that rain event could occur. Similarly, the 2-year storm is a 50% probability. So it's all based on some assumptions, and to say that one event is only going to happen every 2 years is not correct. You could have a 2-year event twice in the same year because it's actually the 50% chance of occurrence. And then we're just rolling the dice on probability, right? But it's the closest way we can do engineering calculations to get some sort of detention assurance.
At that in the Farmer's Almanac, you could use that. They're usually pretty accurate.
We base and they're going to base their calculations on MSD standards, which are empirically developed over years. Is there some climate change? Sure, but it's the best we can do.
If the building, or if the entire property is listed at, what is it, 1.4 acres or something close to that, what about all the rainwater that collects from the roof of the building or the parking lot? How does that drain and where does it go?
I don't see where their roof outlets are, and they can maybe answer this. So hopefully they're going to direct it to the basin. Yeah.
We didn't show roof outlets on the development plan because it's just difficult to go into that level of detail. But on our final construction plans, we'll show the roof drains going into the pond. There'll likely be a, say, 15-inch pipe running parallel with the base of the building buried that all the roof drains drain into that will then connect to the detention pond. So all of our on-site runoff will be directed toward the detention pond so that it can be slowed down and mitigated.
I guess just for the record, that kind of concerns me. That's a pretty big water collection of 1.4 acres into a small pond.
But all of that's calculated in the size of that detention basin. So the rain events that Jim mentioned and the parking lot and all of that has to be collected and detained.
Okay.
So that the runoff pre-construction and the post-construction are equal or less.
Factor in the change from soil to impervious surface, like roofs and pavement, in that calculation.
Is that water that comes from all that runoff, is that filtered or cleaned in any way?
There is a water quality component to our stormwater ordinance, and that's what we were talking about, the weir structure I mentioned at the outlet. What that does is provide a settling time, so there is some water quality component to it.
Okay. The dogs like to play in there, and so do the kids. Are there any plans to put in or request a sidewalk in front of, let's say, where I live, my property?
Not at this time.
They've not submitted that? Another one, on the purpose statement of the Dollar General Dev Plan, it says associated site improvements. I was wondering what they're considering to be a site improvement. How does that improve the site, have a Dollar General?
Sure.
We're using the word improvement, not in the aesthetic sense necessarily, because that's in the eye of the beholder. But improvements in terms of parking lot, drainage, structures, a building, landscaping. That's just a construction term improvement, not really the general term improvement. That's all that means. That makes sense?
It does.
It's interesting. That's a good question because if you look at your tax bill, there's a value on the land and then the improvement, which is your house. That they use the same term even in preparing tax bills. So land has a value, and then everything else that happens to it is called an improvement.
I'd have to disagree. I'm not one who believes that art's beauty is subjective. I think there's art that looks terrible. I'm not quite sure how anyone could validate a building like a Dollar General looking better than a pasture with cows. Lost on me a little bit.
I understand what you're saying, but and I don't mean to
No, you're fine.
diminish your question, but that's a standard thing that's used in development or taxation or whatever.
That's just kind of,
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I understand.
that's just the way it is. Okay, I get it. Will there be any countermeasures to address light and noise pollution coming into the surrounding and adjoining homes?
They're required to submit with their construction plans, a lighting plan, and we've talked about that in the pre-application meetings about having wall packs that shine down and lower level lighting in the parking lot if it's necessary. But we review that before we give them a notice to proceed on construction.
And that's after the permitting has been approved, the zoning permitting.
If it is, yes. Mm-hmm.
I know during the initial steps they took to take a look and measure and pothole the property, they came a good bit of distance onto my property and kind of tore down a bunch of trees and pushed them all into the creek, obstructing a natural waterway. I was wondering, was that permitted?
Referring to, because you reached out to our office, my office, several months ago, and I believe that was a utility clearing. It was either within an LG&E right-of-way or the state right-of-way, and so I don't know, now, you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that it was associated with this development. So to us, it appeared as if it was a utility clearing project. Again, that was in either the right-of-way or the easement, and when we went and looked at it, you know, I had one of my inspectors check it out, and I reviewed the photos. I didn't observe any critical stream obstructions, and it was all natural material, so it didn't seem critical in nature at the time.
Utility company require a permit to do that job? And if so, can I see that permit?
If it was within the state right-of-way, that's the state, not the county right-of-way, so it's not my jurisdiction. It's not the county jurisdiction. You might want to reach out to the district about that.
Exactly who I could reach out to?
Wyatt is the permits coordinator. Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, he's not here.
There he is.
He may tell you that it was a you know, there's a utility line there, I think, and if they were clearing for their existing utility line, they're probably permitted.
Yeah, that's just a permit I'd like to see. Is there an EPA report?
For what?
For the development?
No, that one's required.
Required.
There's no requirement? Okay. I didn't know. I'm new to all this. Thank you for your patience.
Mm-hmm. It's all right.
Will there be additional meetings to address concerns? Or is this the last one? Before the permitting is either denied or granted?
Let me, the process, let me explain the process. So the first thing, they already had a neighborhood meeting. And then this is technical review committee. Their next step is to make an application to the planning commission. And the deadline is the second to last Tuesday of each month. So depending on whenever they're ready, and actually I think Wednesday, and I think that is the day. So their next opportunity is to submit by the end of May for the June hearing. Planning commission will have a public hearing. You'll get notification for that.
Okay.
Because it's a zoning map amendment, it will go to, and this goes to the city of LaGrange because it's in the city limits of LaGrange. So the planning commission only makes the recommendation for the zoning map amendment to the city of LaGrange, and then they have a public hearing. So there's several more opportunities for comment and participation. The planning commission, if they choose to recommend approval of a zoning map amendment at their hearing, they'll also look at the development plan. And assuming they recommend approval and assuming the city council agrees with that and changes the zoning, then the development plan is reviewed by the planning commission at the same hearing as the zoning map amendment, and they'll either approve or deny that development plan in anticipation of making that recommendation to the city.
Okay. I mean, I guess my biggest concern was flooding at the creek, any intake or outtake pipes. that run up to my property line where the old growth trees are, seem to me that it's just going to flood and destroy those trees. And in a similar note, as far as privacy or light obstruction, is there any? Would they be interested in putting some evergreens or something that may sit well there along the south property line?
You want to?
Our biggest concern is complying with ordinance and what we absolutely need to do. I've always wanted to try to improve the property or the aesthetics of the property if I can in any way. So I'm definitely interested in hearing where we would sit those and how we would need to do that, whether it be against our building or on the other side of the detention pond. We can only locate plants and trees places that are available to do so and that are on our property. So that kind of limits us in some ways to do that. Hope that answers your question.
Maybe after this meeting, if you have a few minutes, you can look at the plan and Matthew recommend or talk about where you're and see if it's even feasible.
Okay. Has the part of that property that is closest to the creek ever been zoned as a conservancy at all, or is that a rumor going around town?
I saw that in your letter, and we have a zoning classification called CO1, which is conservation, and it's typically in relation to either steep slopes or creeks and streams. And that zoning classification doesn't put it in a conservation easement. It just restricts the type of development things you can do within that zoning classification. So there's, you were mentioning more like a conservation easement where you say we're never going to develop this property, and it's put on typically by the landowner.
Right.
This conservation zoning classification in our regulations and on our map is typically related to creek, streams, and steep slopes. So it doesn't have, I'll call it a highly restrictive level to it. It just says there's a concern for some natural occurring thing in that area, and we got to be careful what we do there.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. I'll try to wrap this up. I know there's a bunch on there. I did speak to my homeowner insurance agent, and I asked him if there will be an increased, if my policy will be more expensive for coverage, and he said that in some ways depended on the level of or methods of security provided by the establishment. Are there any such plans to keep the area secure or monitor it in any way?
We have on-site security just through a monitored security system within the building itself. We have the security lights that we've talked about a little bit before for the lighting to just try to make sure that the area is as secure as we can make it when there's nobody on site, middle of the night sort of thing. We do try to turn off the lights as close to 9:30 as is possible, but that's directed by the corporate office and we don't have control over that. In terms of security, I would have to defer to the city to see if that area is patrolled or how well, if there's timing through it. But is that kind of what your question was?
The last one is on the actual signage and how it's perpendicular. Is it perpendicular? It's perpendicular to the road, which means it will shine directly at my house. would there be any possible considerations to turn that maybe 45 degrees or V it, as some people say?
That's not our intention at this time. However, I can respect what you're saying in terms of it's pointed directly at your house at 9:30. That sign, and again, the hard and fast 9:30 thing, that's directed by corporate. But we turn the lights off. So it's our intention to try to give as much darkness to the areas as permissible and appropriate for security. Hope that answers that question. Okay.
That's it for now. I appreciate you guys taking the time to let me speak. Thank you for answering the questions. I appreciate you as well. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Anybody else care to speak? All right. So, do you all need to make any final comments of any sort?
Just again, from our perspective, I just want to say thank you again for everyone's time. I know everyone's got busy schedules, and again, appreciate you doing that, taking a time to look at this application and all the details with us, and obviously providing feedback as we indicated originally and throughout this discussion. We certainly want to be agreeable to what the county is asking for any structure, quite frankly, and that would include ours, and then obviously to take into account as well some of the concerns, if possible, of those that are around the property as well. So again, just thank you for your time. We expect obviously to continue the conversation either with you all or your respective agencies or other people that were not here today, and obviously any other concerns that may be raised that we become aware of that we might be able to address. So as you mentioned, there are multiple phases that are still part of this process. We look forward to participating in that. And again, we are available at any time. If you all have any questions or concerns that you want to bring to our attention, we'll be happy to do that as well. So with that, that's all we've got. Again, thank you again for your time. Appreciate the comments as well that were said by the neighbors. And we appreciate the opportunity to move forward with this project.
Thank you. So with that being said, if you receive notice as an adjoining property owner of today's hearing, if the applicant does choose to go forward to the Planning Commission, you will receive written notice from our office as well. In addition, with that being a zoning map amendment, you'll see a posting on the property as well with a sign at least 2 weeks prior to that hearing, in addition to being posted on our website in the Oldham era and all that good stuff. So with that being said, if no one has anything else, it is 1:49 and we will stand adjourned. Thank you.